Hey everybody, Noah from American Trucks. In this video, we're gonna dive into what you need to know when shopping for cold air intakes for your Ram 1500. There are so many variations and options to consider when it comes to cold air intakes. Pretty much every cold air intake is designed to get rid of the factory air restrictions and increase throttle response, torque, and horsepower, as well as sound. But they come in all different shapes, sizes, and materials. How are you supposed to know which one is a good fit for you? Well, I'm gonna break everything you need to know into three main categories, and all the information I'm gonna go over isn't generation or motor specific either. This applies to all intakes out there for the Ram 1500 in general. Now, one thing to note before we dive in is that the Ram 1500s don't need a tune when you install a cold air intake, and I'm not gonna speak to tune versus no tune required. However, installing a tune to support a cold air intake upgrade is always a great idea, and doing so is going to maximize the performance increase that a cold air intake has to offer. Now, hopefully by the end of the video, you'll have a good idea of what to look for when you shop for a cold air intake for your Ram 1500. Let's start with the first category, construction. One of the first things you're going to notice when you start shopping for cold air intakes is the different construction materials out there. The two you're really going to see a lot are plastic and metal. Both have their advantages over the other. Let's start with plastic. Plastic intakes are starting to pop up all over the place, and they've become really popular in today's aftermarket parts scene. A lot of plastic intakes like the K&N Series 63 Air Charger cold air intake are made from high density polyethylene, and that means the intake tube has a really smooth finish, it weighs almost nothing, and they're still strong and durable. Now, with some of the options out there, you'll notice that the intake tube isn't one continuous shape all the way to the filter as well. That's because the plastic is molded, and you can get some more complex and limitless designs that are impossible to get with metal. Now, the Series 63 doesn't have any super complex bends, but the airbox is molded to fit in the engine bay space perfectly with no gaps between its sides. Now, plastic intakes tend to have a better fit overall because of the intricacy possible in the construction process. Plastic doesn't absorb as much heat as metal either, so a plastic intake is going to be great at keeping intake air temperatures down. However, plastic won't withstand even close to the same height of a temperature as a metal intake can. But if your engine bay is getting hot enough to melt a plastic intake, you've probably got other problems, my friend. With the Series 63 intake, everything from the intake tube to the airbox itself is made from plastic, and that's gonna help keep costs down as well. Maybe you've heard or even bought into the stigma of cheap plastic, but that's simply not true. It's debunked. Heavy-duty plastic intakes are really awesome, and they hold their own in the realm of options out there. Metal intakes can come in a variety of finishes and designs, but most are gonna look very similar to the K&N Series 77 high-flow performance cold air intake. This intake kind of sets the bar for what a metal intake should look like. It's a simple intake tube with no complex bends or anything like that, and an airbox that's bent out of sheet metal to fit in its place. Metal intakes are typically mandrel bent, which means the tubing is bent in a way that doesn't make ribs or pinches in the material, which could slow airflow down. Now, with intakes, you want as little air resistance as possible, so mandrel bent tubing is one of the great features of a metal intake. Metal intakes like the Series 77 are constructed out of aluminum all the way from the airbox to the motor. Aluminum is lightweight, it's strong, and it's seriously heat resistant. It takes a long time for aluminum to heat up, so it's a great material to make cold air intakes out of. However, once it heats up, aluminum takes a while to cool back down, and in general, metal is going to hold heat much longer than plastic. Aluminum is going to be stronger than plastic when hot, but again, there really shouldn't be a scenario where the intake should get hot enough to melt. Both plastic and aluminum will do great under the hood of a car, but where aluminum really shines is when you polish it. See what I did there? All jokes aside, you can't polish black plastic to a chrome mirror finish, but you can totally do that with aluminum though. So if you're looking for a chromed out look under the hood, or maybe you're just into shiny things, then a metal intake like the Series 77 would be worth paying a little bit more for. They aren't usually a ton more than plastic, but a metal intake usually has a noticeable difference in price. In this case, the Series 77 costs around $50 more than the comparable 63 plastic intake from K&N. Regardless of the construction material, the biggest factor that's going to play into getting cold air to your motor is the airbox design. The airbox can make or break the heat management of your intake, as well as keep the filter clean or not. Depending on the purpose of your vehicle, you're going to want to choose between two different airbox styles, open or closed. Open airboxes are a great cost-effective option, and they function similarly to a heat shield. They'll still block heat from getting into the engine, but they aren't going to completely enclose the filter. A lot of open airboxes available look and function just like this AFE Magnum Force Stage 2 cold air intake, where the airbox has gasket material around the top and seals against the inside of the hood. Now, the bottom of the airbox mates up to the lower half of the factory airbox, and they sit together as a nice little unit. Yes, the airbox does seal up against the hood, but it's not sealed like a closed airbox would be. Another thing to consider is what you use your Ram for. If you're on dusty roads or really muddy and gross trails all the time, then an open airbox might not be a great idea for you. You'll end up having to clean your filter a lot, and it would just be a little bit of a mess. But if you're looking to keep your truck on the road, then an open airbox will keep air cool, be a more affordable option than a closed box, and it's going to allow air to flow into the filter restriction-free. Also, purely for looks, being able to see a colored filter like this out in the open looks really cool. The blue adds a nice little splash of color, and the different filter design like this oval one on the AFE really stands out with an open airbox. Closed airboxes are going to be your best bet at keeping hot air away from the filter, and it'll be perfect for someone looking to either do some off-roading or get the best heat management possible. The S&B cold air intake is incredibly popular, and there are over 500 reviews on this particular intake on our site. Now, this airbox is closed with an inlet on the bottom that connects to where the factory airbox would on the fender for a feed of fresh air. Now, the lid on this guy is fully sealed with a gasket around the edges, so hot air in the engine bay can't make it into the airbox. This design is going to be incredibly effective at heat management, and this is also going to be the best design in terms of filter protection. With a closed airbox like the S&B has, debris and dirt can't make their way to the filter easily, and the filter is going to stay clean for much longer. And with the S&B specifically, you can see how the filter is looking still because the lid is clear with a nice little logo on it. Then hand in hand with more material comes higher price. Typically, closed airboxes are going to use a little bit more material, and they're going to cost a little bit more than the open box ones depending on the brand, because the airbox is a little bit larger and it has more parts to it. The last category we're going to look at has to do with the filters themselves. There are two main kinds of filters, and those are going to be oiled or dry. Oiled filters have a sticky oil applied to the filter media, and that's meant to catch smaller particulates and keep them from passing through the filter and ultimately into your engine. Oiled filters are also unique because they're washable. You can just clean them in the sink with water and re-oil them when they get dirty. Now, that means not only are oil filters doubly protecting your motor with oil and the media, but also your wallet as well. You might find yourself wondering why every filter isn't just oiled then. Well, you could imagine that a sticky filter would get dirty more often, and that's totally true. Oiled filters require more maintenance than dry filters because they get gunked up easier, which means you'll be removing and cleaning them more frequently, especially if you're in a dusty or sandy area. The Red Rock cold air intake has an oiled filter. That means this intake is going to be tailored towards somebody who's looking to use it on the daily drive, and they're looking for some added protection to go along with their upgraded intake. An oiled filter is going to work great for keeping small, road-typical particles from passing through the filter. Yes, the filter on the Red Rock intake will get dirty more often than a dry filter, but an average amount of road dirt isn't going to force you to clean the filter all the time. Now, as far as dry filters go, something like the Rough Country cold air intake is definitely going to be a better fit for the off-road enthusiast. A dry filter like the one in this intake isn't going to collect a ton of dirt, so it's great in a dirtier environment. You'll notice that the airbox on this intake is similar to the one on the Red Rock, except for the fact that it's more closed and protective of the filter. When you don't have the oil as a backup, typically you're going to see dry filters go hand in hand with the more enclosed airbox to keep large amounts of dirt out of the filter. If you're one of those people that love to just bury your RAM in the sand or mud, then a dry filter would be a great fit for you. Also, a dry filter is going to work well with a pre-filter bag, which will act similarly to the oil on a filter as another layer of protection, but it won't hold on to any debris. Now, these intakes don't come with a pre-filter bag, but they are available on our site as well if that's something you feel you need. So hopefully by now you have a better idea on what to look for when you're shopping for cold air intakes for your Ram 1500. And again, everything I talked about doesn't just apply to these specific intakes that were showcased, but any intake you're looking for in general for your Ram 1500. If you liked this video, go ahead and subscribe to American Trucks and leave a comment to let us know which intake you liked the best. We also have all the intakes you saw in the video in stock on our site, as well as tons of other parts for your trucks. For all things Ram, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.